Welcome to the next episode of the Revolution Today podcast. My name is Lauren Collin. I am so excited to have you here with me today. This podcast will be audio essays, starting with meaning and purpose, then ending whiteness and the universal fulfillment of liberal ideas, and finally, a practical critique of the US government and political philosophy. The first essay, Meaning and Purpose, is, for me, the issue to be addressed right now. Why are we doing this at all? What is the purpose of revolution today? I believe we have never actually had a real philosophical discussion in my lifetime about the purpose of government and the means of government and the ends of government. I believe it's time that we have that discussion. Seemingly, the last time it was had was in 1790, or even earlier in the 1780s, when the Constitution was being written. And I guess there was a big blowup, one could argue, during the Civil War. But even those discussions were always amongst an elite or the elite. I believe with the technologies that we have today, that we actually, for the first time ever, can collectively have this discussion. And so I touch on that in the first audio essay, Meaning and Purpose. The second essay, much more on the nose, Ending Whiteness and the Universal Fulfillment of Liberal Ideas. White and white race is a social construct. It is the source of evil for the last 400 years. All other ideas of race exist because wealthy, powerful white people created the idea of whiteness, removing the ideas of Scandinavian or Norwegian or European or whatever, and creating this general idea of whiteness and a white race in order to have chattel slavery, to have some moral justification for owning other human beings. That justification, while the owning of human beings has sort of slipped away, not that many of them don't want it back, but that same justification is what allows those people in power to make sure that whites, as much as they exist, are separated from everybody else. So we have constant discussions of race, which are circular and go nowhere because there's nowhere to take something that is a social construct. And we don't have conversations of class, which is real. Like we actually do actually have differences of how we live. But again, how we live has nothing to do with the color of our skin or where we might be from. It has to do with how much money we make and the opportunities we have. In order to get to that conversation of class and focus on markets and freedom and liberty, we need to end these ideas of whiteness and the white race. And finally, we will turn to a practical critique of the US government and political party philosophy. Basically, it is time that we collectively work to end the Reagan Revolution. It has done nothing but harm everyday Americans. And those people that created whiteness, the super wealthy and the plantation owners, well, they became our modern day oligarchs and they still control us. And it is time to end the oligarchy. It is time to end trickle down economics. It is time for the counter revolution to the Reagan Revolution. It is time that we make an actual liberal revolution and we fight for liberty. And that will be what we discuss here uh, on these three audio essays that make up this podcast. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Please share them in comments. And I look forward to continuing this discussion. The first audio essay, Meaning and Purpose.
We all live, we all die. Knowing this is the start of universal joy. You should be allowed to live with as much or as little happiness as you desire to make a reality for yourself, with whatever good fortune or bad fortune that should also come. For me, the cause of all time to be addressed right now is that collectively we should be discussing how we want our society to maximize not just our individual happiness, but to maximize all possible journeys away and toward that happiness. And for that discussion to be worthwhile, it should be working in tandem with organized action to change the structure of society to support every individual, you and me. As best I can tell, after studying the situation for 48 years now, there are 335 million truths today in the United States, and roughly another 8 billion different truths around the globe for each and every human being alive right now. And I do mean right now. There is only one truth that only they will ever know. That goes for you too. Now, a fair share of people will honestly and forthrightly tell me there is in fact only one universal truth and that they alone know it. I am 100% certain for their absolute right to believe that truth and to point right back the fact that I don't agree with them. And the very act of my not agreeing proves my point. This might even be you. The only takeaway I care to have at the end of any such discussion is that each of us can live without interference, our version of that universal truth, always held so dear. Dedication to this idea is to never accept someone taking your truth away. The ultimate devotion is to never accept someone else taking another person's truth away, and always speaking out that all truths are valid for each individual. For me, the liberalism of the Enlightenment, the first celebration of the individual in the West since the total victory in the West of Judeo-Christian Islamic theism, is still the best argument for the individual. And when I say individual, I mean you and me. Liberalism is a standalone philosophy that applies to individuals and society, maximizing each individual's happiness in relation to minimizing any force of government to ensure the safety and security of the people and the government. Liberalism is the only philosophy that embraces no absolute answer on how to organize and admits the two precepts are always in tension. As an individual living in society, you have a sacred right, always available and delivered on demand, to participate in the discussion of what happiness you will give up in exchange for safety and security at the hands of the government. We've never had a completely liberal society where every individual was actually free to pursue their happiness. For all of time, the societies that have most approximated the ideal always fell way short. In fact, many of liberalism's greatest voices used their reasoning to argue for liberty for only the few, almost always white male owners of property. I believe that by having an open and honest discussion of what government is and what it should do, that liberalism and the centering of every person as a whole and equal member of society who can pursue life as they see fit will win. And that we can universally live the ideals embodied in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. My starting point is that my purpose as a human being is to live this one life free, to enjoy the wonders of happiness under my own terms, and that to have any impediments put before me because of someone else's morality or their virtue and their belief that I need to follow their morality and their virtue in order to achieve my own happiness is an affront to my human dignity. As someone who cares so deeply for my own happiness, I know the best way to secure this sacred right is to make sure my family, my friends, and you, the stranger, are always free to pursue your life as you see fit. Having defined my purpose, and in effect yours, I believe liberalism, maximizing each individual's happiness in relation to minimizing any force of government to ensure the safety and security of the people and the government, is the best and only just governing philosophy. as it is the only governing philosophy that cares for the input of the individual. Liberalism embraces the tension and the contradiction between the freedom of the individual and the stricture of society. It requires, but cannot force, all participants to engage. By pursuing the impossible dream of perfect engagement, only liberalism can lead to the best approximation of perfection, that is, each of us pursuing our own happiness. I'm now dedicated to my purpose and to the cause of liberalism for all. I don't think our current politics serves liberalism well. This is not the false argument that both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are the same, but the recognition that neither party represents liberalism in the law or economy, and that in order to achieve liberty for all, a new conversation must start before a new movement can blossom. My timeline to cause change lies somewhere between today and an infinite hope for the future. Not only is that okay, that is the point. To start this journey together with you, I have two questions. What is the meaning and purpose of an individual human life? How would you design a society to allow each individual to fulfill their meaning and purpose?
The second audio essay, Ending Whiteness and the Universal Fulfillment of Liberal Ideas.
Join me in ending the religion of whiteness and white Christian nationalism that has plagued this continent for 4 centuries. Now is the time to bring an end to the white race. The white race and white Christian nationalism started in the minds of men who planted it into the minds of others to maintain a control they otherwise would not have. The pillars of the white race are a fake superiority and undeserved entitlements, not only unjustly taken, but then denied to others. Now is the time to elevate a new religion, a human religion based on the individual and individual alone. The highest form comes when asked, "What race are you?" "Why, I am of the human race." "And what is your religion?" "Why, my religion is humanity and loving all of creation, and loving all other people like I love myself." Any pretense of being a loving and kind person is shattered the second you can't fully accept another human being as they present themselves to you in any snapshot of time. Finding fault in someone for having a difference of custom or physical trait and then using it as the sole justification of your own rightness and an imaginary rank over them cannot ever be loving kindness. Whiteness is a distraction from collectively doing the work of discussing the type of society, politics, and economy we want and implementing real change that benefits everyone, allowing them to pursue their own happiness. More insidiously, non-white people have to waste their time explaining themselves or defending themselves to white people. This is a gross injustice to the individual. There are no white people. There could be Norwegian, Dutch, Irish, or Albanian peoples. Being proud of one's heritage, celebrating it, and sharing it, where all are welcome to join or merely appreciate, is a fine feeling. Claiming that because you are Norwegian, Dutch, Irish, or Albanian, so you are therefore some mythical white, is total and utter nonsense. You most likely believe this white nonsense because you think it gives you power, the ability to be first and demand what you believe to be yours, but what is actually everyone's. That power is mere illusion. While you are chasing that illusion, you are actively giving up your own power to make the most of your own life and to find your own happiness. You are literally giving up some of your own humanity in order to strip someone else of theirs. And your imagined gains fall away to the real loss of having never lived your own life. If you use your God to argue for the appropriateness of whiteness and discrimination, of first justifying an other and then creating an other, then that is your personal God and not the universal God of morality, ethics, and human virtue. Your God is not my God. Your truth is not my truth. My God has room for your God. My truth has room for your truth. But if you're going to tell me your white Christian nationalist God demands that you sacrifice other human beings for its power that it then shares with you, I am going to have to say, I'm not really impressed with you or your God, and I'll have nothing to do with it. Let's not forget about the whatabouts. What about the blacks? Black in America is a thing without whiteness, but would not exist had it not been for whiteness. Slavery took away the Angolan, Congolese, and Gabonese ancestors and replaced it with a forced servitude that affords no past to the descendants. The descendants fought and continue to fight to be afforded their full liberty due any human. However, what was stolen and ancestral past can't ever be returned. So Black Americans have created their own uniquely American history out of the ashes of the plantation. And like the Norwegian, Dutch, Irish, or Albanian, the Black American should always be celebrated. This isn't a case of what about. This is justice, or what might be thought of as justice approximating some sort of propriety over the arc of time. What about the Jews or the Muslims or the Asians or the Mexicans or the gays or the women or the mixed? Well, what whiteness recognizes as differences to be shunned, punished, and destroyed, universal liberalism recognizes as our strength and shared humanity and worth celebrating. If you are not actively working to end whiteness and to end all forms of discrimination, then you are on the side of whiteness and discrimination. Claiming to not be racist, sexist, ableist, or ageist while not actively fighting against them makes you racist, sexist, ableist, or ageist. You're either fighting it or you're for it. I recommend joining the movement to end whiteness and white Christian nationalism and to replace it with universal liberalism and love. You will be welcomed. You will be celebrated because that's what we do here. Everyone is invited to be themselves.
And our third essay, A Practical Critique of the US Government and Political Party Philosophy. We have been living under the shadow of the Reagan Revolution for nearly 45 years. That Republican Revolution was a straight up attack on the idea that government can ever do any good. The concurrent cultural revolution that greed is good, especially when it rewards white men with power, has helped those very same men attain a level of power that hurts the rest of the citizenry. That the citizenry bought the revolution of trickle down economics and became its foot soldiers is bad on us. We pay the price every day. For better or worse, the foot soldiers are fickle, and I think we are getting ready for the counter revolution. My hypothesis is that every president since Reagan and both of the leading candidates in this election are still playing within the rubric set out by the Reagan Revolution. Kamala Harris' platform, so much as it is the current Democratic Party platform, lives very much within the contours of tax and budget policy going back to the Economic Recovery Tax Act of 1981. What's my evidence? Well, Democrats are simply arguing at the margins. Don't get me wrong, taxing the wealth of the wealthiest amongst us is the number one issue of our time. Doing it by simply raising rates and adding more tax credits is playing by the rules set down by Reagan. It's not trying to end trickle down economics, which has resulted in the wealth of the bottom 90% of us being transferred directly to the top 10%, but rather attempting to slow down that upward transfer of wealth. While the two parties have many differences, at the end of the day, neither is working to actually break the hand of the oligarchs off of our politics, culture, or economy. The Republican Party is actively working to strengthen the oligarch's hand, while the Democratic Party is simply working to not allow that grip to become any tighter. The Republican Party since 1964 and solidified in 1968 has become the party of ethno-fascism and, in the last decade, totalitarianism in the form of longing for an actual fascist dictator. On the road to fascism is the oligarchy and oligopoly that the Reagan Revolution delivered for the wealthiest of the wealthy. Today's Republican Party stands for white supremacy, nationalism in place of authentic patriotism, and a belief in whiteness, and that power should only be wielded by a select few to benefit the social construct of a white race. What 2024 Republicans represent is not anything particularly new in the United States. This strand of white supremacy has existed since the country's founding and has certainly had its time over the last 250 years when it was ascendant. The best evidence for this is our Constitution as originally designed. The Democratic Party is not about to tear down the oligopoly or do any real harm to the oligarchs. The reason is simple. They are not about to bite the hand that feeds them. A cynic would take up Adam Smith's argument that the Democratic Party represents the oligarchs who know that if they go too far, the people will absolutely revolt and not only bite off that hand, but also cut off that head. It's like Smith knew the French Revolution was around the corner at the time of the publishing of The Wealth of Nations. Today's Democrats offer a coalition of white, non white, and non Christian citizens a version of corporate populism that protects oligarchs and oligopoly while providing the rest of us limited rights and limited representation. Sure, blacks and gays can exist and maybe not have to fear too much from the police. And yeah, they will give 15 people who qualify a targeted tax credit while only arguing for further incremental change. But they will never actually demand true liberalism. They will never actually center the individual over the corporation. And they will never demand an ethical, commercial society and functioning market economy. The counter revolution will not be led by the Republicans nor the Democrats, and it will be fought tooth and nail by our oligarchs. This counter revolution will require we, the people, to act independently and in our own self interest, recognizing, as Smith did, that achieving your personal self interest requires making sure everyone around you can pursue their own interests. We have been gifted a government of the highest ideals to ensure our individual life, liberty, and happiness by people who, for their time and ours, proved to lead lives that were less than ideal. They never came close to practicing those ideals. That doesn't mean the ideals aren't worth fighting for, nor does it make those ideals false. They have simply not been fully recognized yet. For me, Frederick Douglass stands as the guiding liberal light, for he makes clear that it'll take all of us to turn these ideals into a reality. And I, for one, think the time for a liberal revolution is now. That ends this episode of the Revolution Today podcast. I appreciate your time and attention as we discussed the first audio essay, Meaning and Purpose, the second audio essay, Ending Whiteness and the Universal Fulfillment of Liberal Ideas, and our third essay, A Practical Critique of the U.S. Government and Political Party Philosophy. Please leave comments, engage. I'm looking forward to creating a discussion and a movement. And it's going to take each and every one of us following our own self-interest and making sure that we create a world where everyone else around us gets to follow their own self-interest. With that, I will talk to you next time. No fear, only love.